Yes, hi. Yeah, my name is Samuel Zerzer for the Samuel Zerzer channel. Welcome you all, and thank you for supporting me. I have a link at the bottom if you want to contribute. That'll be great. And I got to do more of these, videos. I mean, we're looking at these, these people who work for Obama as CIA and DNI, and these are all psychopaths. I mean, we're living in such bizarre time in the past 8 years. These are the people who actually lied for the past 8 years to Congress, to the Republic, to the Americans. And a former DNI, James Clapper, which I have many videos of just in the past week or so, under oath, collusion, it's not collusion. He's playing around with words. I don't know, these Obama, it's people that who worked for him. I mean, literally, I have a feeling it's like either they're psychopath or they're bipolar or something. I mean, literally not normal. Former DNI James Clapper again in an interview with NBC Chuck Todd. Okay, because he had one previously before. On Sunday that he saw no smoking gun. I repeat, he has no smoking gun, and you have to see it. I'll put the link at the bottom. You got to see the interview. I couldn't. I broke a rib. I couldn't stop laughing. But then again, it's not really funny. He says, I have no smoking gun evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian actors. That's what he actually said. He also said, I have to say, at the time I left, I did not see any smoking gun certitude evidence of collusion, but it certainly was appropriate for given all the signs. What sign? And no evidence. Certainly appropriate and necessary for the FBI to investigate. And like I said in my other videos, he was the one who actually told James Comey, former FBI and another psychopath, to start the investigation. He's the one that said, with no evidence, maybe a collusion. And everybody does backdoor. Which president doesn't do anything with backdoor with the Russians or the Germans or the French or the British? Starting from first president, I guess. Sure, Ronald Reagan, Ford, Bush, Clinton. I'm sure they're all in the back door. I mean, who hasn't? And this is why maybe he's coming forward, because now with Mueller investigating, the former FBI investigating and all that, he's got to come clean, this guy. Now, also, James Clapper, former DNI, said he shared the same concerns with a former CIA director, John Brennan, claiming his dashboard warning light was clearly on. Well, we all know he's a Hillary supporter, obviously. I know he can't stand Donald Trump. But, to go on a witch hunt like this is totally nuts. I will tell you that my dashboard warning lights was clearly on, and I think that was the case with all of us in the intelligence community, very concerned with the nature of these approaches to the Russians. Now, he also said, if you put in context with everything else we knew the Russians were doing to interfere with the election, with no evidence, obviously, and just the historical practices of the Russians have been doing it since the beginning of time, and the Americans and everybody else, who typically are almost genetically driven to co-opt, penetrate, gain favor, whatever, which is typical of Russian techniques. So we were concerned. Everybody does. I mean, seriously, it's from the beginning of time. Now, the interview with James Clapper, dovetailed on his May 14th interview. Remember that? Where he also said that there was no Russian collusion. I remember that interview. Now, again with this interview, on the 20th, this interview took place, actually, it was on Sunday the 28th, okay? Now, former CIA Director John Brennan also said in a recent testimony, okay, which I have, that there was no collusion, that the Russians have tried to interfere with the U.S. dating back to the 1960s. So there's nothing new, folks. The Russians' narrative is just a fake news, like I've been saying, a story to distract from the 8-year crime spree, also known as the Obama administration. Like I've been saying, Benghazi, the emails, the server, the Fast and Furious. I mean, I can just go on, and also the IRS. You guys remember, They were targeting all conservatives. Obama and Hillary, the rest of the deep state, were counting on Hillary's election victory, obviously for their crimes. And this is why they're going crazy. Now he's going on TV saying there's nothing there. There's just nothing there. I don't know what else more, to say. This is an explosive interview, and I don't know. He's been lying and lying. I don't know how, if you, okay, you're a Democrat, you're watching this video, come on. Again, just to sum it up, Clapper says, again, no smoking gun evidence of Trump collusion with Russia. Again, okay, and this is on NBC. You'll see the link at the bottom. This is the second time he says it, okay, and just tired of hearing this crazy. I mean, this is an interview with NBC's Chuck Todd, okay, which actually I respect, and that's it. Again, my name is Samuel E. Zerzer for the Samuel E. Zerzer channel. Welcome you all. Please support me and keep watching. And, like I said, I have a lot of good videos out there. And take care. Bye-bye.
That's what I do. That's the word we use. You use the word assessment. You use the word tradecraft. I use the word evidence. And the good news for me is lots of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle use the word evidence too. One of my colleagues said there is more than circumstantial evidence of collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign. Now, there are only two types of evidence. There's circumstantial and direct. So if it's more than circumstantial, by necessity, it has to be direct. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of one of my colleagues on the other side of this very committee. Another Democrat colleague on the other side of this committee also used the word evidence, that he has seen evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. And yet a third California Democrat said she had seen no evidence of collusion. So that's three different members of Congress from the same state using the same word, which is evidence. And that's the word that my fellow citizens understand, evidence. Assessment is your vernacular. Tradecraft is your vernacular. You and I both know what the word evidence means. And we're not getting into whether or not you corroborated, contradicted, examined, cross-examined. We're not getting into how you tested and probed the reliability of that evidence. It's a really simple question. Did evidence exist of collusion, coordination, conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russian state actors at the time you learned of 2016 efforts?
I encountered and am aware of information and intelligence that revealed contacts and interactions between Russian officials and U.S. persons involved in the Trump campaign that I was concerned about because of known Russian efforts to suborn such individuals, and it raised questions in my mind, again, whether or not the Russians were able to gain the cooperation of those individuals. I don't know whether or not such collusion, that's your term, such collusion existed. I don't know. But I know that there was a sufficient basis of information and intelligence that required further investigation by the Bureau to determine whether or not U.S. persons were actively conspiring, colluding with Russian officials.
Do you know the basis of that information that you share with the Bureau?
The truth is that they interfered in our elections, and the truth is the American people want to get to the bottom of it, and the truth is we, as elected officials and on this committee, should be doing all we can to make sure that we find out how they did it, we make sure we know who helped them do it, and that we also get to the bottom of making sure that it doesn't happen again. So my last question to you is, do you believe that one of the things you talked about was exploit? You said that that even though the election is over, Putin is still, and Russians are still exploiting us. What did you mean by that?
I mean that, again, this has been a pattern of Russian intelligence services to try to take advantage of the openness of Western societies, free press and other things, and political parties and systems to find opportunities and vulnerabilities that they can use to advance their interests. They will continue to do this. I think they're probably taking some lessons from this past experience. I don't believe that this is going to make them at all recoil and not engage in these types of things in the past. I think that what they will do is to further refine their tactics so that they can be as successful as possible in the future.
Thank you.
Mr. Obiondo, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Brennan, thank you for being here today. Thank you for your service. And I have a number of questions I know in an open setting you won't be able to answer, so I'm looking forward to the closed setting. But Ms. Sewell asked, to the extent you can answer in this setting, what the elements of Russian active measures in the campaign of the election were. So are these can you be any more specific than your answer with her about what they were doing, what you saw?
I think they're all chronicled in the Unclassified Intelligence Community Assessment in terms of it's very clear that the GRU was responsible for hacking into the networks of the DNC, DCCC, and were responsible through a cutout, releasing it through places like Lucifer 2.0, WikiLeaks, and others. And so they were taking advantage of information that they had collected that they determined, if it was publicly released, was going to advance their objectives that I had enumerated before. In addition, they amplified a lot of fake news stories that tried to denigrate Secretary Clinton. So it was a mixture of propaganda, it was cyber collection, and it was the release of information that was, again, seen as damaging to one of the candidates that they were trying to harm.
So you said a moment ago that you don't believe they'll be deterred from engaging in activity like this in the future. Do you think they would attempt to influence the 2018 midterm elections?
I have, unfortunately, grudging respect for Russian intelligence capabilities and their aggressiveness, their pervasiveness, and their determination to do what they can to undermine this country's democracy and democratic institutions, as well as those certainly in Europe and other areas. So I believe that they will try to exploit elections, but they will not wait only until elections. We know that they, again, are aggressively collecting and trying to evaluate individuals who may be influential, who currently are in government or are not. The Russian intelligence threat is a serious one, and this is just one manifestation of the nature of that threat.
During your tenure as CIA director, did you have the resources and authorities necessary to conduct what you needed to as it pertained to the Russians?
I had resources and authorities that allowed us to do things, but I think this is something that maybe in a classified setting we can talk more about.
And if we need to go to classified setting, I understand, but were there additional suggestions that you would give to this intelligence committee of what we should be doing proactively to enable not just the CIA but the FBI and the NSA for to thwart the future meddling?
Sure.
Okay. Based on what
we
happened,
do find any kind of criminal behavior, I think that the minority would agree that those type of that type of information would be referred to the Justice Department, which is the proper jurisdiction. But with regard to the main question at hand, in your experience with the Russian trying to involve themselves in our election, did you ever find any evidence, as the ranking member spoke of collusion while you were the director, did you find direct evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Putin in Moscow while you were there?
Mr. Rooney, I never was an FBI agent. I never was a prosecutor, so I really don't do evidence. I do intelligence throughout the course of my career. As an intelligence professional, what we try to do is to make sure that we provide all relevant information to the Bureau if there is an investigation underway that they are looking into criminal activity. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I was convinced in the summer that the Russians were trying to interfere in the election. And they were very aggressive. It was a multifaceted effort. And I wanted to make sure that we were able to expose as much of that as possible.
But was there intelligence that said that the Trump campaign was colluding with Moscow during their campaign?
There was intelligence that the Russian intelligence services were actively involved in this effort. And having been involved in many counterintelligence cases in the past, I know what the Russians try to do. They try to suborn individuals. And they try to get individuals, including U.S. persons, to act on their behalf either wittingly or unwittingly. And I was worried by a number of the contacts that the Russians had with U.S. persons. And so therefore, by the time I left office on January 20th, I had unresolved questions in my mind as to whether or not the Russians had been successful in getting U.S. persons involved in the campaign or not to work on their behalf, again, either in a witting or unwitting fashion. And so, therefore, I felt as though the FBI investigation was certainly well-founded and needed to look into those issues.
When you talk about, and I'm running out of time, but hopefully I'll be able to circle back, can you describe their capabilities beyond just propaganda and actual infiltrating, whether or not there was, you had intelligence to infiltrate the campaign with capabilities beyond just propaganda and beyond just reaching out or trying to influence the news or the campaign, and how long have we known about these type of capabilities?
There's a lot of intelligence that's been built up over the years about Russia's MO in terms of trying to gain influence in Western democracies. How they've been able to use individuals, they've been able to use politicians, political parties, they've been able to use elements within the media to try to make sure that their objectives are realized. And so, again, knowing what the Russian MO is and has been, including in elections in Europe, I certainly was concerned that they were practicing the same types of activities here in the United States. And that's why, as I said, we set up a group in late July that included the FBI and NSA. I wanted to make sure that every information and bit of intelligence that we had was shared with the Bureau so that they could take it. It was well beyond my mandate as director of CIA to follow on any of those leads that involved U.S. persons. But I made sure that anything that was involving U.S. persons, including anything involving the individuals involved in the Trump campaign, was shared with the Bureau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Time expired. Mr. Schiff, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wanted to follow up on a comment that I made in the opening statement, and that is with respect to a number of the allegations that have been made recently that the President or his aides may have sought to enlist the help of members of the IC or Director Comey himself to drop the Flynn investigation. Have any members of the IC shared with you their concerns that the President was attempting to enlist the help of people within the intelligence community to drop the Flynn investigation?
No, sir.
Are you aware of any efforts the President has made to enlist the support of intelligence community personnel to push back on a narrative involving the collusion issue that Mr. Rooney was asking about?
I am unaware of it.
I want to ask you about the allegations concerning the President's meetings in the White House, in the Oval Office with the Russians. First, what concerns you might have if the allegations are accurate about sharing information that we may have obtained from an intelligence partner, what impact do you think that might have on not only that partner but other intelligence partners' willingness to share intelligence with the United States? But more than that, if you could also shed your insights on one other thing, and that is the Russians' reaction to that meeting was at least twofold. One was Vladimir Putin's offer to validate what happened in the Oval Office, to provide his own transcript of that meeting, but also the Russian publication of photographs from that meeting. The Russians had to understand that the publication of those photos would be harmful to the President, or the President would have invited American press into that meeting. What do you think motivated the Russians to publish those photos? What do you think motivated Putin to make a claim he knew would never be accepted, to provide their own transcript of that meeting? Is this just further efforts to weaken the President, disrupt our political process? How do you explain those events?
A lot of questions there, Mr. Schiff. The first point I'd like to make is that I shared classified information with the Russians while I was director of CIA. CIA, on a routine basis, shares classified information with Russians on terrorism matters. It doesn't mean that it becomes unclassified. it means that it retains the classification but is releasable then to Russia or to other partners. So that in itself is not unprecedented. And I don't know what was shared or said in the Oval Office, but if the reports in the press are true that Mr. Trump decided to spontaneously share some intelligence with the Russians, I think he would have basically violated two protocols. And those two protocols are, one is that such intelligence, classified intelligence, is not shared with visiting foreign ministers or local ambassadors. It's shared through intelligence channels because it needs to be handled the right way, and it needs to make sure that it is not exposed. He didn't do that, if the press charges are accurate. Secondly, before sharing any classified intelligence with foreign partners, it needs to go back to the originating agency to make sure that the language in it is not, even just providing the substance, going to reveal sources and methods and compromise the future collection capability. So it appears as though, at least from the press reports, that neither did it go in the proper channels, nor did the originating agency have the opportunity to clear language for it. So that is a problem. What I was very concerned about, though, is the subsequent releases of what appears to be classified information purporting to point to the originator of the information, liaison partners. These continue to be very, very damaging leaks, and I find them appalling, and they need to be tracked down. So that was where the damage came from, I think, that it was released in the press. Now, the Russians are watching very carefully what's going on in Washington right now, and they will try to exploit it for their own purposes and to see whether or not they can further, I think, seed partisan animosity here in Washington and try to roil the waters, the political waters here. And so even though the election is over, I think Mr. Putin and Russian intelligence services are trying to actively exploit what is going on now in Washington to their benefit and to our detriment.
Falpa, again, on Mr. Rooney's questions.